Welcome back. Former President Donald Trump will return to the site of his attempted assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania, for the first time early next month. It comes as the House task force investigating the assassination attempts against the former president held its first hearing today. Committee Chair Mike Kelly, who represents the Butler area, asked witnesses representing local law enforcement if they felt adequately prepared by the Secret Service on July 13th.
We were certainly prepared for the missions that they had given us. There were additional things, obviously, that probably needed covered, but they never asked us to do that.
I feel that with them being the lead and we were in a request assist function, we provided what they asked for and we secured the inner perimeter of the farm showgrounds.
And joining me now is the ranking member of the House Task Force investigating the Trump assassination, Colorado Democrat Jason Crow. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate you having me.
Well, such a critical topic. I do want to start with what you said in your opening statement. You said the Secret Service is stretched too thin. Congress did just approve $231 million for the agency in their spending bill. Do you think that adequately addresses your concerns, or does more need to be done?
Well, there's a couple of different categories of issues. One is there was a cascading series of failures on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. So things that they had the resources and capability to do, things that their processes and their protocols required them to do that just did not happen. So that raises a question about training, about command and control, and about culture. The second issue is one about resources. You know, the Secret Service is undoubtedly stretched very thin. Acting Director Rowe came before our task force a few weeks ago and said that his agents are redlined, is the way that he described it, meaning they're working 80-plus hours a week. They're deployed 3 weeks out of a month. They've been doing so for a year. So they're working harder than they've ever worked before because campaigning is different than it was just a few years ago, and the threat environment is higher than it's ever been. So you combine this perfect storm of stretched thin service and under-resourced service, being asked to do a lot in a high-threat environment, and then a series of failures that day, and you see what happened.
And you, as you lay out the enormity of how you see these challenges, what is the timeline for getting the Secret Service to a place where they do feel fully staffed, where they do feel fully prepared to protect whether it be a former president or a current president?
Well, there's a longer-term issue at play here and a shorter-term issue. The longer term is, the size of the Secret Service, whether their training, whether their paradigm of how they provide security and work with local law enforcement and other agencies is actually the right method and the paradigm for the 21st century and the threats that we face. That we are looking at, but we're also predominantly looking at right now the short-term challenges between now and the election. We want to make sure that elected officials are safe, and that's why we are digging in. We're providing oversight as quickly and expeditiously as possible, and that's also why Congress unanimously passed that $230 million, because you can't mass-produce Secret Service agents. It actually takes years to recruit them, to vet them, to train them, to get them on a presidential detail, 5 to 7 years actually at minimum. So the question is now, with this additional resourcing, can they rely on Department of Defense and other federal agencies to backfill and provide additional security in the near term?
Your colleagues in the Senate released a report that in part pointed to a lack of communication between the Secret Service for the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. Do you believe that the Secret Service, that lack of communication is ultimately to blame?
Well, that was one really critical failure. There's no doubt about that. So I'm a former Army Ranger. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I learned that in operations like this, whether it's a military operation or a sophisticated law enforcement operation, command and control, so unity of command, but communication are essential. Without it, you can't do anything. And it was really clear there wasn't unity of command. There were multiple command posts. They weren't talking to each other. The different agencies on site that day didn't even have communications that were interoperable. The perimeter was not secure. The perimeter that was secure was too small. There was no drone coverage. There were many, many different things that went wrong that day, and we're looking at all of them.
The House voted to expand the scope of the task force to also obviously look at the second assassination attempt as well. Will that be incorporated? How will that factor into the work that you all are doing there?
Yeah, the House did vote, as you mentioned, to expand our jurisdiction, so we will look into the incident in Florida as well. We absolutely will undertake that. We have the ability to do it. We have the resources to do it, and we are going to undertake. We've already started our investigation, requesting documents and information, and we have plans to start doing interviews for that incident as well. They're very different incidents, however. You know, we have in Butler, Pennsylvania, a scenario where it was very apparent numerous failures by the Secret Service. In Florida, there's no evident failure, right? Actually, their system appeared to have worked as designed, and the plot was indeed foiled. So, but we're going to look at that. We're not going to take anything for granted, and we're going to make sure that everything did indeed go right, and whether there's a resourcing question as well.
Yesterday, former President Trump seemed to suggest there was a link between Iran and these assassination attempts, even though authorities have indicated there isn't one. Just to be clear, have you seen any indication, or at this point, do you think that there is not one, that these are separate and unrelated incidents?
Well, we haven't seen any indication in the Butler event, and it's too early in our investigation to tell any connection in the Florida event. We just have started that in the past week, and we have to undertake the first phase of that investigation. But what we do know is that Iran is showing an intent and actually taking some actions to attempt to harm or potentially assassinate current and former elected officials. And that is, both Democrats and Republicans, so this knows no party, but they certainly are showing their desire to do that in retaliation for the strike against Soleiman, their commander of the Special Republican Guard, or the Iranian Revolutionary Guard under the Trump administration. So they've looked for many years to try to retaliate for that. And there is some intelligence that shows that they're looking for opportunities to do so. So we have to be vigilant. This is serious stuff. We can't allow that to happen, obviously. And we're going to take it seriously and make sure that we're addressing it accordingly.
And Congressman, just finally, with the last 30 seconds we have here, as you know, former President Trump has also blamed some of the rhetoric, Democrats, for calling him a threat to democracy. What is your response to that?
No, Democrats have uniformly rejected and condemned political violence, from President Biden to Vice President Harris to Hakeem Jeffries to me and all my colleagues. We've been very, very clear about that. And Americans can understand the difference between political rhetoric and having fierce debates and tough debates and calling for violence, and we certainly do not do that.
Congressman Jason Crow, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.